Storage space on any boat is at a premium, and using containers can often be the best way to organize it. But are all storage containers created equal? Hi, I'm Nica and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. Today I'm sharing 8 tips and things that you might want to think about as you contemplate what storage containers you want to buy for use on your boat. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Nica, makers of the hydration spray bottle, odor-free dishcloth, and self-cleaning washcloth. Nica offers practical gear designed to save water and reduce waste. A water bottle that doubles as a hose, a dishcloth that doesn't get stinky. Yes, please. Visit lunatechgear.com to learn more. Use code BOATGALLEY to save 10% on everything. Lunatech, innovative gear for your outdoor adventures. Storage containers can be an incredible asset, or they can just be a real pain and take up more space than they save for you. So how in the world do you make sure that you get the right kind of containers for you? We have containers of 4 different kinds. And I'm not even including the things that are kind of our repurposed containers that we've used from things like peanut butter pretzels or specialized rice and those kinds of things. But the 4 containers that we've gone out specifically to buy to use on the boat are open ones that have no lid at all. They're more like plastic baskets. There are ones with press-on covers, kind of like the old-style Tupperware or even the Rubbermaid ones that you can buy it's just the cover on top of the box. And it may press down and it may make a clicky kind of sound, but there's nothing positively latching that cover in place. We have positively latching boxes that have gaskets in them, so they're a little bit more watertight than the ones without gaskets. So those are the 4 different kinds of containers that we use on Calypso. Again, they're the open lid ones, so more like a basket. There's ones with press-on covers, and then there are 2 kinds of positively latching boxes, the kind that come with gaskets and the kind that come without gaskets. So what do you think about when you're thinking about these particular containers? So the first is, what are you storing? This matters not only for the kind of box, but also for the size of the box. An example that I use is when we put a printer on board. We were looking for a gasketed box because it was electronic and we wanted to make sure that we had as much going for us as we could in terms of keeping it dry. We were looking for one that would fit the printer pretty snugly. We were really ideally looking to fit it into a locker that is behind the settee that has about a 5-inch high opening. But we couldn't find a gasketed box that wasn't just overly huge. And also we couldn't find one that had the printer dimensions in it. It would fit in one direction, but not in the other. So we didn't manage to find that kind that fit it precisely, but we did find one that was a little bit larger, that holds the printer and a ream of paper with an extra printer cartridge or 2 and the power supply. Now we have to find a different place to put that box, but we have the printer in a gasketed box with all the things that can fit in it. So that's really helpful, both in terms of size and kind. After you figure out what you're storing, you also have to think about where you're storing it. And again, this is a consideration both for the kind of container and for the size that you want to think of. So again, that box that I was talking about with a printer, we, in an ideal world, would have found one that fit through the opening in that locker. Didn't work, so we have to come up with a different place for it. There are some epoxy boxes that we have, and those epoxy boxes and paint boxes that we have tend to be the larger containers with just sort of a press-on lid. It doesn't have a positively latching lid on it. Those are going to be stored in the lazarette. They're being stored in the lazarette for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that that's where we have the space to put something that large. So think about where you're going to be storing the boxes that you're buying, as well as what's going into them. My friend Wendy was recently looking for containers specifically for her fridge on Luna, and she measured the available space that she had in all directions. And when she walked into the store, she actually had those dimensions written down. She was able to find positively latching boxes that worked perfectly, stacked 3 on top of each other in that space that she had. A third consideration, or a third tip, is to look in lots and lots of departments. We're constantly on the lookout for containers, and we tend to want to see things in person as opposed to just buying them sight unseen online for all kinds of reasons, but not the least of which is we like to be able to feel it and pick it up and touch it and feel how durable and sturdy it feels. So we're constantly on the lookout for these containers. We're not 100% done with our stuff on board yet. We haven't completely moved on board as we're still in project mode. But at stores like Target and Walmart and IKEA and Home Depot, we've found containers not only in the home organization section or the storage section, but we've found containers that have worked in the kitchen aisle, the laundry aisle, the seasonal items aisle. So don't just get stuck thinking that you only are going to find things for organization in the organization section, but keep your eyes open and be ready for whatever might appear to you. I just alluded to this a little bit when I said that we wanted to see things in person, and not all containers are created equal. Even in terms of the plastic boxes that we are talking about, you will find the gamut of softer, flexible boxes. Most of those that we have that fit that definition are much more in the open box, more basket-like comment, as opposed to the hard, latchy, positively latching boxes. But I have seen softer, flexible ones that are available. You'll see them sometimes at boat shows. And you're going to find boxes that are brittle ones that will crack at the first provocation. And you'll find a whole bunch of them in between. It is hard in our experience to tell online which ones are which. But our personal experience has been that perfectly clear boxes tend to be much more brittle than the more opaque ones. You may find that you have a preference as to what you like, both aesthetically and what it feels like and how it fits in your spaces. Another thing to think about is that maximizing space usage is not always easy. So boats generally aren't square, or at least not boats that I'm familiar with. Boat storage isn't square. And if you're fitting square boxes into not square spaces, it means that you might have some dead space. And this might just be how you're going to have to roll with it. You may decide that you don't want to use boxes in those places where it's particularly challenging in terms of angles and there's more soft stuff maybe that you can stuff. But you may also be able to squeeze some of those soft goods into the spaces, or maybe some rolls of toilet paper or spare Ziploc bags, or maybe just because you have a ton of what might be quote unquote wasted space, it doesn't mean that you have to fill every tiny little bit of it to be organized and efficient. Speaking of sizes, you will be seeing interior dimensions and exterior dimensions, and some manufacturers only give you one set of those, and they don't tell you if it's inside dimensions or outside. And the exterior dimensions matter because that will dictate where you can store the boxes, but interior dimensions matter in terms of what you can fit inside. Again, I'm coming back to that printer example. We needed the interior dimensions of the boxes to be big enough to fit the printer. Be aware, too, that boxes often are not straight-sided. And so they're narrower at the bottom than they are at the top. And sometimes manufacturers measure the inside dimensions from the top of the box, meaning that if you go with just that interior dimension, your printer might fit on the top, but then it gets jammed halfway through and doesn't actually fit in the bottom. So think about both interior and exterior dimensions when you are thinking about your storage containers. Speaking of sizes, think minimal. Think minimal size. It's way easier to store small boxes than larger ones. And it is also way easier to find what you're looking for in a small, focused box than a large one. Sure, we could have just 3 great big boxes that we fit in the lazarette and throw everything into them. Well, when we're going looking for that one screwdriver, it's going to be one massive pain in the butt if it's among all the epoxy and all the paint and all the sandpaper and all the rest of it. Way better for us on Calypso to compartmentalize and say, yep, we've got a box. Here's our screwdriver box. Here's our sandpaper box. Here's the box of epoxy and paints. So thinking about minimal size to fit what you want to fit in there, and maybe you have 2 boxes of epoxy and paint, but smaller sizes are going to be easier to fit in to the not particularly square spaces that you have on a boat. And finally, think outside the box. The best containers for your tools might be Rubbermaid containers that you found that are supposed to be used in the kitchen at the grocery store. The shoe boxes that you find at Walmart, they might work perfectly well as t-shirt drawers. Just because someone else has named it for a specific kind of storage, it doesn't mean that you have to use it that way. So I love boxes and baskets. They're basically a way of making smaller lockers within lockers, and it helps to organize everything and every space on board, from the fridge to the lazarette to the cockpit, even to our clothes lockers. So finding the right storage boxes for you and for your boat may be a little frustrating as you're going through the process, but it will pay off dividends big time. What are some of our favorite boxes on Calypso? There are links to all of these in the show notes. You can find them lots of different places, but these are the ones that we use over and over and over again. And again, they're all within that range of kinds of box. We have lock and locks. These are often ones that we go to for the galley. We have utility dry boxes. These are sport utility boxes. They're kind of like Pelican boxes at a very, very fraction of the price. We've actually had these on Calypso for almost 30 years. They're our go-to toolboxes. They're our go-to medical kit box. We've just bought more of them for Mischief. We've got Walmart Mainstays flexible drawer organizers, and these are kind of thin, very flexible plastic. They're more in the basket style. And these are just spectacular for jobs where we're trying to corral small bits together. They've been super useful when we are taking something apart and want to have some place that's sort of non-skid to put the tools, the small tools and the fasteners that come out. We also love them on the nav shelf for putting some of our smaller navigation instruments into one space. We have a number of Sterilite gasketed boxes, and this is one of these that we first found at Home Depot in some seasonal display or another, like in September when people were doing back to school shopping. They're very durable, thick walls. They'll resist any puncture from sharp objects inside, and we really like that they are gasketed. So nice to find something a little bit heavier duty, a little bit bigger feeling in some larger sizes with a gasket. Sterilite also does positively latching boxes that don't have gaskets, and those are also very helpful and useful. And finally, the biggies, and we have lots more of different kinds, but these are the ones that we have actually decided that we're using lots of, and we'll buy some more as we move back on board. We have Rubbermaid roughneck boxes, and these are the ones that are lazarette specials. We've got paints and epoxies that need to have spillage contained. We actually have our generator. We've got a Yamaha 1kW generator, and it fits specifically and perfectly inside one of these Rubbermaid roughneck boxes. That the lids don't positively latch is a little bit of a negative. That there's not a gasket on that means that it's not perfectly watertight. There shouldn't be lots of water coming into the boat, but those are a concern, or that's not a concern, but that's definitely a consideration. But that they're large enough to hold things like paints and epoxies, and particularly that generator. It's pretty awesome. We also have lots of other square-sided containers with screw-on tops that have been repurposed from things like shark fittings and fancy rice mixes. Don't be afraid to reuse good containers. I would imagine you can find these sorts of things at Goodwill or Salvation Army or on Facebook Marketplace, or if somebody's moving and needs to get rid of a whole bunch of their stuff, you may be able to find a number of these things without having to go to a store. But I can't wait to share an anchorage with you where we don't have to be looking for storage containers because we've got it all sorted out. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends. We love it when you don't forget to subscribe. Have the most spectacular week.